Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's workshop on outdoor leak detection. We really appreciate your being here. Um, as with all of our workshops for Valley Water, we are presenting this evening in 3 languages, so Spanish, Mandarin, and Vietnamese. If you would like to hear this presentation in one of those languages, go ahead and click on that little world icon, and it will open the options. You select your option, and then go ahead and also make sure that mute original audio is also clicked or highlighted. And that way you will hear the presentation in the language that you selected. The one in the example is Spanish. And then also go ahead and click on that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, maybe at the top of your screen, and open it up so that you can see all the questions people are asking and all the answers. We will be translating the Q&A into all languages. It may take a moment to do it, but we will be doing that, so follow along. And you can ask questions, you can add to other people's questions. It's really meant to be a discussion area. So please use it and ask us a lot of questions. I want to thank Valley Water for hosting this evening's workshop, and I'm going to turn it over to Nick from Valley Water. Oh, not yet. I'm not going to yet. First, I want to tell you that within 24 hours of this class being completed, you're going to receive an email from Zoom. So make sure that you check your spam box or your junk box in your email, because it is coming from Zoom and it will be coming to the email that you provided when you registered for the class. And in that email will be links with resources, as well as a link to these guidelines produced for Valley Water. And now I'll turn it over to Nick Simard from Valley Water.
Thanks, Pamela. Just wanted to again reiterate, thank you all for being here. We appreciate you attending, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the conservation team here at Valley Water and all the resources and tips that we have available for you all to utilize. So, I mean, let's just go over why conservation is important. Number one, it saves you money. I mean, we all pay utility bills, maybe not directly, right? Like, for example, I pay to my HOA. I'm still paying that water bill every month. So I want to conserve water as best I can, save myself money, not only because it's the right thing to do. It's also the water energy nexus that we should really think about. So we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and a significant portion of the energy we use in the state is to move water. So we really want to be mindful of that. And Valley Water views conservation as a supply of water for our county, because every water drop that we save, or every gallon of water we save, is a gallon of water we do not need to import or pump from the ground. So we want to continue to keep making great strides like we have been. We're over 80,000 acre feet that we've saved, which is a very significant amount of water. Just to reiterate, just also let y'all know, this week is the EPA's WaterSense Fix a Leak Week, so that's another reason why we did outdoor leak detection in line with this week here, third week of March. EPA is WaterSense is an EPA program. Works to promote water conservation and water use efficiency throughout the country. And specifically this week is highlighting leak repairs and detection. And I'm going to go into, in the next couple slides, a little bit more details on how our water is used here in the county. However, one thing to highlight is that 12% of our water use is as leaks. So that's pretty significant. That water is not being used for anything, and it's actually causing a lot of damage. If any of you have had a leak, it damages everything. Water is very powerful. So other elements to look at from our water use. Showers 20%. So a lot of that is our behavior, so we can change that. Clothes washer is 17. Valley Water offers a laundry to landscape rebate program for reusing your clothing water wash, clothing, clothes water wash water in your landscape. And we can, more than happy to follow up on any information on that if you're interested in that. But essentially that 17%, you're going to be able to use that water twice. So you already paid for it. Why just let it go down the drain? Some other um, values I want everyone to look at and pay close attention to would be the breakdown between the business and the residential side of water use, and the fact that it's about 50-50 for indoor and outdoor use. So, having high efficiency fixtures, making those behavioral changes, for example, taking shorter showers, those are some things that we can do. But after a certain point, we got to look outside of that scope, and outdoor conservation has a lot of value and a lot of potential for that. Next slide. Thank you. So we offer, like I mentioned earlier, a myriad of different outdoor conservation and indoor conservation programs. We do fixture replacements for multifamily housing and commercial, institutional, industrial sites. Um, if you wanted to put a sub meter on your ADU or a property in a multifamily setting, we offer rebates for those as well. Um, on the outdoor side, we have our landscape rebate program, which is our flagship program, the Gray Water Laundry to Landscape rebate that I mentioned earlier, and then some outdoor surveys that y'all can get done for absolutely free. So I'll go into all of these as we go through the slides here. Thank you. So one quick way that you can save a buck and also conserve some water would be to utilize our online shopping cart. So you can order a lot of different items from us for free. So we got aerators for the bathroom, for the kitchen, hose nozzles, shower heads. We have the chrome one that you can see here. We also have one in white if that matches your aesthetic a little bit better. We have toilet flappers, leak detection tablets for toilets, and so much more. I mean, we have online a lot of literature, practical plumbing guides, sustainable landscape guidelines that were developed by G3 as well. So you can order all those things online, and we'll send them to you for absolutely free. You won't have to pay for the items or the shipping, as long as your address is within the county. So I mentioned some landscape surveys. So for most of the residential side and for some smaller commercial, institutional, or multifamily properties, we have our WaterWise outdoor survey. So we'll have our irrigation technicians come out, schedule an appointment with you, come out and turn on every zone of your irrigation controller, go through each zone and note to see if there's any leaks, any areas. I mean, many times our irrigation systems, as they should be, are coming on very early in the morning or very late at night. So you don't really see those leaks. That could be a total geyser. In a moment, there's a slide that has like a geyser of a sprinkler system. You don't really see that. If you're an early riser, you might see it, but most people don't. So scheduling this free survey, it's a great way to find them. It also is going to recommend, hey, you're eligible for some rebates through our landscape rebate program, in X, Y, and Z areas. So you can actually learn about how you can probably make some of those upgrades in your landscape. We also have the large landscape program. So this would be for larger commercial sites, maybe not as applicable to most people on the call, but if you do own a business or own a large landscape like that, they'll give you a water budget, or you could also qualify for a similar survey to the residential side. Our landscape rebate programs, our flagship conservation program, residential sites can get up to $3,000 back for making these upgrades. So you could be removing lawn, upgrading irrigation, or implementing rainwater capture systems. Something specific to this webinar would be upgrading your standard irrigation controller to a smart controller, and maybe pairing that controller with a flow sensor that can detect if there's a leak and let you know on your phone about it and actually stop the leak from continuing until you fix it. So we issue rebates for those. Um, uh, and for multifamily, commercial, institutional, industrial sites, you can actually get up to $100,000 back for a combination of the irrigation or the landscape conversion rebates. And next slide, please. And I mentioned some irrigation upgrades that you can make, and those would include converting overhead irrigation into an inline drip system, um, upgrading bodies and nozzles to high efficiency models with check valves and pressure regulation internally, as well as, like I mentioned, those controllers with the flow sensors and rain sensors as well. Next slide. The rainwater capture elements, talking about rain gardens, rain barrels, cisterns, which is just a larger rain barrel, essentially. Um, and so, these are all also elements that you can add to your landscape rebate program project, or just, do a one-off. We like to say the rain barrel is the gateway rebate because, you do that one, easier rebate, and that gets you started on your water conservation journey. So. I mentioned that gray water laundry landscape. 17% of our water use is from clothes washers. So um, reusing that water is you're getting your money's worth out of it. And plants don't need drinking water, right? They get runoff water all the time, and they're totally fine with it. Making some small behavioral changes can really lower your water use, increase your water use efficiency, and your landscape will thank you for it. And then this was that photo I was talking about with the geyser. So again, we don't always see this. When you have that survey, we might catch it. If you do have it, we will catch it. But there's also water waste. So if you notice, you drive by a property, I've driven by a property every morning and see, okay, they're really running off poorly, or there's a major leak on site. You can call and report the water waste. You can send us an email, and they're not going to necessarily get in trouble or anything, but we're going to go and educate them on the problem and follow up with all these resources that I just went over with everybody on how they can fix the leak. So we're going to go through on the questions. You can throw them in the Q&A if you have them. I'm happy to help you out. And I'll be putting some links in the chat to answer any questions, or if you want any resources to link you to any of these websites, I can put them not in the chat, sorry, in the Q&A if you want them. So just ask. And you'll also be getting these links after the webinar. So I'm going to
Great.
pass it back over to G3. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick. I want to say two things. One, go ahead and put the links in the chat too, because that way people can, might be in either side. And secondly, I love the phrase, the early riser sees the geyser.
It's very
Like,
true. It's very true. And I'll go ahead and put all those resources in the chat right now.
okay. Well, oh, and there is your contact info, and perhaps you can add that contact info into the chat as well. Well, as Nick said, it's Fix a Leak Week, which is very difficult to say 10 times fast, but really fixing leaks is something that can happen all year round. So we are going to take on this question in the typical G3 way of thinking about it as a puzzle. And these are the 6 components of our puzzle this evening. We're going to see how does leak detection fit into the watershed approach, and what are some basic things to remember. We're going to try to identify the problem and then track it down to the actual source of the water leaking. We're going to explore what could possibly go wrong. Spend just a few slides on pool and water feature leaks. And then we're going to talk about ways that you can actually change your landscape to avoid leaks. And this is especially relevant if you are going to do one of these turf conversion programs where you're removing grass and replacing. It's a great opportunity to install the infrastructure that helps you to avoid leaks in the first place. So let's start by remembering the basics. As everything that we talk about with regard to landscaping is viewed through the lens of what we call the watershed approach to landscaping. And essentially, this is a way of thinking about every property as though it's a mini watershed. And what we're doing is we are observing, where does water fall on the property? That's usually the roof. And where does it drain off of the property? That's usually something connected to the street, like a driveway or a walkway. And streets really become, like creeks in wet periods. So it's a good way for us to envision what's happening on our property and realize that we can actually control all the water that is on our property between that, roof area and where it flows off into the street. And in order to really create a landscape that's resilient in the face of any type of climate chaos, and also just beautiful, and using a lot less of our drinking water, we want to follow the four principles of the watershed wise landscape. And these four principles start with growing healthy living soil that acts like a sponge. Spongy soil is the most important thing that you can be doing in terms of making your landscape more resilient. And we talk about that in a lot of our other classes. Also, selecting climate appropriate plants. For us, climate appropriate plants are Mediterranean plants, as well as the local California natives, which are really the most climate appropriate plants we can select. We also are going to be passively capturing rainwater and using it as a resource. Passive rainwater capture means that we are contouring the landscape. And essentially, this means that there are no more flat yards. Especially if we're going to be removing grass, this is an opportunity for us to create depressions in the landscape, to hold on to water, to redirect it from our roofs into the landscape, so that the plants have the opportunity to have the amount of rainwater that they desperately need at the time of year that they need it, so that they can make it through the summer with less supplemental irrigation or supplemental water. And then the fourth component, and this is really where tonight's presentation fits into this, is we're going to use highly efficient supplemental irrigation only when necessary. This essentially means that our irrigation systems are manufactured, the components are manufactured properly, and the system is designed, installed, and maintained properly. And we are using weather-based irrigation control, which is, irrigating or applying that water when the plants actually need it based on the weather. It's not applying it just because it's a Tuesday. So we want to try to make our irrigation system as efficient as possible. And one of the things that contributes to water use efficiency is eliminating leaks. And so that's what tonight's all about. And as Nick mentioned, annually, Americans are wasting approximately 1 trillion gallons of water, which is enough water for 11 million plus homes. It's a lot of water. And just to put it into perspective for you, if you have an irrigation system that has a leak that's only 1/32 of an inch in diameter, so that's about the thickness of a dime. If your irrigation system has one leak like that, you could be wasting as much as almost 6.5 or 6,000 gallons of water per month. So 6,000 gallons of water per month is wasted with this tiny little leak. And what's interesting to understand is that in California, a watershed-wise landscape that covers about 1,000 square feet only needs about 6,000 gallons of water every year. So in 1 month, you could be wasting the water that your entire landscape would need for a year. So that just kind of puts it into perspective why we really care about this. We're going to start this evening just kind of getting oriented and giving you some tools to help you identify right away whether or not you have a leak in your system. And one of those things is really making you feel more comfortable with your water bill. And there are a couple of things I'm going to draw your attention to. The first thing is that there's a section here, and you can see the numbers that are on the bill. We're going to start with number 3, because number 3 is showing the bill details. It's telling you the size of your water meter. It's telling you what the billing period is. So is it 1 month or 2 months? In this case, it's 2 months. And it's also identifying meter readings. And so it's showing you when your meter was read previously, and now it's being read after this period of time, how much water has gone through that. And so I'm going to come back to how we actually calculate the amount of water in gallons in 1 second. The next thing I want to draw your attention to is this number 4 area, which is breaking out all of the possible charges that are associated with your water use. And something I really want you to kind of have in mind is this kind of tiered pricing. where the lower your water use overall, the lower your rate is that is applied to that. So really managing that water down, your landscape water down, is going to make a big difference on your water bill. And then let's go to number 6. And this is really, kind of where the rubber meets the road for your water bill. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing here. So you can see here where there's like a red box down at number 6, and it's under units. Now, units is a word that essentially means 100 cubic feet of water. So a unit is 100 cubic feet of water. This is, water agencies think in cubic feet. That's just the way it is. CCF is also standing for 100 cubic feet, C being the Roman numeral for 100. And uh, it shows here that you have 27 units that have been used over the period of time. Well, how do you convert that to gallons? It's really simple once you understand it. You multiply your number of units by 748 gallons. And that's going to tell you how many total gallons of water, which you see right next to the little box. That's the total gallons of water that have gone through your meter in the period of time, in this case, 61 days. Divide the total gallons by the number of days, and you find how many gallons per day you are using. And in this case, it's 331 gallons per day. Now, so what? Well, I'm very interested in seeing how that compares to last year. What is different between this year and last year? Yes, it's a few days difference, but it's the daily use has changed pretty dramatically. Is there something going on? It's the same time of year. This is something that would immediately draw my attention. I'd want to see these numbers be very close to each other. We also might want to see, like as seasons change, you can keep your eye on the water use. If you're using the same amount of water in the wintertime that you are usually using in the summertime, there's something going on. And that's because in the summertime is when you're going to be running your irrigation more frequently. So water use is usually a little higher in the summertime, or could be even a lot higher. But if it stays the same during the rainy period when we're not using all that water outdoors, there's something for us to look at in our landscapes. So this is kind of the first line of defense. Now, in order to do most of this leak detection stuff that we're going to be talking about, you need to be able to take a look at your water meter. And that's usually out close to the street, close to the property line. It's usually in a box. And if you look inside that box, you're going to find, the meter. And there are two kinds of meters. We're going to talk first about the analog meter. So the analog meter is essentially set up almost like, a car odometer. It's pretty straightforward. The numbers will click from right to left. And, each time they click, they're adding up. The furthest right number is showing you 1 cubic foot of water. So 1 cubic foot is equal to about 7.5 gallons. So it's going to take a little bit of time for that first box to click as you're using water. And the thing I really want to draw your attention to is this leak indicator. It might look like this, it might be a little flag, but it's basically this, it's a little separate identification part of the meter. And if you have turned off water on your property, like in the house and even in the landscape, and that little it's not really a dial, but like that little thing, that indicator is moving, is, spinning around or swirling, it means that there's a low flow happening through the meter. So there's something going on. Your cubic foot number may not be moving very quickly, but this is detecting, that really it could be a very tiny bit of water. Now, I just want to say, that there are some things in your home that will use water kind of no matter what. And a great example of that is an ice maker. So when we talk about turning off the water to the house and looking at leaks and so forth, we're going to just remember that even if no one's in the bathroom and no one's doing laundry and you're pretty sure all the water is off, you want to make sure you disconnect your or disable anyway your ice cube maker, because it could be running water behind the scenes. Anyway, this little leak detector is going to be your friend for doing all the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. Now, you may also have a digital meter. And the good news about digital meters is they are read usually in gallons or 100-gallon increments instead of in CCFs or in cubic feet. So you don't have to do any multiplying by 748, usually. And they are also read from, they're read from left to right. And they're pretty straightforward. When you start to see the numbers change, this is this is indicating that water is moving through the meter. And when you go to the decimal points to the right of the decimal, or the digits rather, to the right of the decimal point, this is going to indicate water use less than a gallon. So this gets, really, this can get very precise, a lot faster than the cubic foot measurement does. But one of the great things about the digital meter is there's usually an icon that is on the meter that begins to flash when there's some kind of a leak detected. And so in this case, in this particular meter, there's a little flashing faucet icon. And this is basically telling you that there's an intermittent leak. And if that icon actually goes on and stays on, it means you have some kind of continuous leak that you're going to need to investigate. So in a lot of ways, digital meters, help you identify things maybe a little bit quicker, but both of them are using this low flow sensor, and the meters all have that. All right, so you're going to see this slide again in this presentation, but I want to just get you oriented with your irrigation system. So the irrigation system is essentially a series of underground pipes that are moving water first under high pressure and then reducing that pressure down. And there's like intermittently water in pipes that is under pressure, and that's what runs the actual sprinklers. And so your irrigation system really starts at the water meter. And one thing I want to emphasize here is that the water agency is only responsible for water up to the meter. Once that water passes through the meter, this is your responsibility. It's on your property, essentially, even if it's some distance between the meter and where your property actually begins. That anything past the meter is going to be your responsibility to identify leaks and to make repairs. So when you find your water meter, you're going to then trace the line to either your home, or there may be a split where part of it goes to the home and part of it goes to the landscape. Some people, the water goes into the home first and then comes out, and others have an actual split with two lines. These are called main lines. The main line is coming out of the water meter, and you could have an irrigation main line that essentially tees off from your home main and goes out into the landscape. So you're going to want to determine whether, which configuration you have. And that's what's happening at B here. Then there are going to be a series of what are called gate valves, places where you can turn off the water, essentially. And they're going to be all over this system, but you're going to definitely have one somewhere along the main line. Some people will have a backflow preventer. A backflow preventer is a device that is keeping water that has already gone out into the landscape or into your home from coming back into the public water supply. It's preventing a backflow of water. And it is a device that what you're seeing here is kind of a, it's really more like a kind of commercial device or what you'd see at a multifamily house or a very large property. It essentially stands above the grade. It has copper piping in it. It actually is inspected on a regular basis, and it has its purpose is to make sure that only clean water is in the water supply. So it protects everybody. Um, Once it passes through the backflow preventer, again, if you have one, it might go through pressure regulation, it might go through a master filter of some kind. It really depends on your setup, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in just a few slides. So now the water is out in your landscape, essentially, and it is going to be flowing to your irrigation valves. Now, the irrigation valves are interesting. They are essentially like a gateway. They are shut most of the time. And all of the water between your water meter and your irrigation valves is under pressure. In other words, it's flowing. The pipes are completely filled with water. This is if there's a break there, there's up into the irrigation valve, this is where you're going to have high pressure release of water. But the irrigation valves will open up and allow this pressurized water into the landscape through what are called lateral lines. And lateral lines are these white lines, the PVC pipe that's buried under the ground. When that pressurized water is coming out into those lateral lines, it will actually pressurize each of the sprinkler heads, if you have pop-up sprinkler heads, and the water then comes out of the emitters of the sprinkler heads. The same is true for an irrigation valve that's controlling drip irrigation. The irrigation valve holds that water back, that pressurized water, until it is told by the irrigation controller to go ahead and open up and allow that pressurized water out into the tubing that is out in your landscape. And then the controller says, okay, close, and the pressurized water is shut off from the lines. Now, that pressurized water, it's no longer pressurized in these lateral lines and in the tubing, but it is still there. And this is sort of important to remember that these lines are filled with water. So you could still lose that water if you had a leak even after the irrigation valve is closed. So it's just something to think about. So that's the general way that an irrigation system works. We're going to go through this in more detail, but I wanted to orient you to kind of understand how everything worked. Now, one of the things that you're going to do when you're walking around your property is identify all the different kinds of shutoff valves that you have. You might have some of these ball valves, which are my favorite because they're easy to use, or you might have a gate valve like this. In a ball valve, when the handle is in line with the pipe, it means that the valve is open and water can flow through. When that handle is perpendicular to the pipe, it means that the valve has been closed. I'm going to draw your attention to this water main shutoff, which of course you really don't want to touch too often, if at all. But there is a water main shutoff in an emergency or in a situation where you're going to be doing a big leak detection project. And the way that you actually manage that is by turning the valve clockwise with a pipe wrench. And what's interesting about this is it's made difficult to close, right? That you do have to really make a concerted effort to do this. But when this is shut off, it is shutting off the water to the entire property. So that's important to know. And again, if you have some kind of you have some kind of an emergency or something, or a mainline break, you can shut the water off. Okay, let's go through how we can identify some of the problems. And that means we've got to start looking for clues. First thing is, most of what's going on for plants and for landscapes is happening below grade. The best thing you can do is find a soil probe, buy a soil probe, and use it to find out what's happening below ground. This is a simple device that you can get at a hardware store in some cases, but certainly from an irrigation supply store. It's not very expensive, and it's a wonderful tool for understanding what's happening in your landscape. And, then you start looking around. Like, for example, is this a water feature? Obviously, if you have geysers, puddles, or sunken spots, this is a really good clue that something is going on. Now, it may not be happening right where the puddle is, but there's definitely something going on. A puddle could be a mainline break. This is one of those breaks that's only, a 32nd of an inch. And you can see because the water is under high pressure in your main line, this is causing a lot of water to come out. Or it could be an indication of a lateral line break. Those lateral lines are the PVC lines that are under the ground in your landscape that are carrying the water under pressure when the irrigation valve is open. And pooling water could be an indication that there's something going on in a lateral line. Make sure that you take a look at your backflow preventer if you have one and see, are there any leaks happening there? Hose connections. This is a place that, that we see all kinds of leaks happening at hose bib connections. And at your shutoff valves. There could be a seal that is damaged, and so you may have some kind of either debris inside, or just the seal has gotten really old, or its pressure's affected it, and so it's leaking. Now, drips can be quite subtle. So I usually recommend that you take a piece of paper towel, fold it up, and walk around after all of your hose bibs are off, and just, put that underneath the hose bib just to see. You might be surprised that water is coming out very, very slowly from your hose bibs or from other things that might be leaking. And of course, you want to identify if there's something more serious going on, like here. Um, what is making this happen? There's no obvious flow of water across the top of the concrete, so it's likely that there's something going on beneath the concrete with this kind of a situation. Look at your valves. If they look like this, time to replace them. They may be leaking. So there are two kinds of valves. We're going to show you a bunch of times, but one way to see irrigation valves, and especially if you have a backflow preventer, you will see your valves are probably going to be located in boxes in the ground. These are called globe valves. And if the top is not floating off, and if it isn't really soggy around it, you're going to have to open that up and look inside. It's possible that they are leaking and filled with water below ground, and you just can't see it above. The other kind of valve that you could have is called an anti-siphon valve. They're sitting above the grade, and so they're pretty easy to see when they're leaking, especially if it looks like this. Wherever copper pipe or galvanized pipe meets PVC, that is a potential place for a leak. And really, in general, that's something to remember, that any place that there's a weld or a coupling, these are all potential places for leaks. With the emitters, spray emitters, it's pretty easy to see a head that's tilted like the one on the left. But the one on the right is also indicative of a leak And the reason is that this head is not operating at the proper pressure. It's not flowing out the way it should be. It's just kind of dribbling out. That means that something is affecting the pressure along the irrigation line, and that is likely to be a leak. Water is likely to be coming out instead of staying in the pipe so it can turn the emitter on. Broken or clogged heads obviously are problematic, and so too are sunken heads. I draw your attention to this because, this is typical irrigation design. The sprinkler head is right against the sidewalk, and it's right in the corner where the driveway meets the sidewalk, and you've run over it pretty much every time you've parked your car. So that thing is definitely something to take a look at. If you have old galvanized sprinklers, it is definitely time to replace them. And then, of course, your drip irrigation tubing could also have breaks in it. Look at the plants in your garden and just kind of step back and take a really good look at them and observe them for their health. One of the things that's a challenge about looking at plants is that a plant that is underwatered and a plant that is overwatered looks exactly the same. They both have this, drooping or dead leaf material on them. It's very hard to tell just from looking what's going on top. In order to really find out what's happening here, that's when you use your soil probe and you go down into the roots of this plant and you see, is it very dry or is it too wet? And I would say 80–90% of the time, plants that look like this are too wet. Now, this is not technically a leak, but it can be a big water waster. And what you're seeing here is the irrigation system was installed and plants were installed, and they were tiny when they went in, but now it's all grown up and the irrigation system is being blocked. The emitters are being blocked by this too tall plant material. So rather than, try to add, some kind of riser onto your sprinkler heads here, and it's very, very ugly when you do that. Please don't do that. The better idea is to convert to drip irrigation. So that is really, because your plant material here is quite mature, and putting down drip line would really be a better alternative. Now, again, technically not a leak, but it could be a big water waster, is what's called low head drainage. And essentially, this is a situation where you have a depression in the landscape and there's a sprinkler at the bottom of that depression, or maybe you have a hillside and the sprinklers at the bottom of the hillside are leaking water, like what you're seeing here in this picture. So why does that happen? Well, what's happening here is when the irrigation controller turns off the water stops sending water into the lateral lines, those lateral lines are still filled with water. And if you have a slope, all the water is going to drain to that low head. And the low head thinks that, oh, the sprinklers are on. Okay, I'm going to pop up and I'm going to allow this water to come out. The way that you keep this from happening is by using sprinkler bodies that have check valves. And Nick mentioned that Valley Water has check valves available for you to change out your sprinkler heads. So this is an excellent way to eliminate that low head drainage and keep the water in the pipe so that it actually stays on your landscape. Again, not technically a leak, but a big water waster is when your spray irrigation system is not operating at an optimal pressure. And when that happens, you see misting like what you see here. This is operating at too high a pressure, and the system just isn't designed for it. Irrigation systems nowadays, spray systems are designed to be about 50 psi. If you've got 80–90 psi coming into your spray system, or your drip system best operates at about 25 psi. So if you've got this high pressure water coming into those systems, for sure things are going to be amiss. And that wear and tear on your components can actually contribute to other kinds of leaks beyond what you're seeing here, which is this misting from too high pressure. Now, once you've identified that you have a problem, you're going to need to track down where the water is actually coming from, which may not be the exact same place where the problem is observed. So we're gonna have to get into it and track it down. And we're going to use our water meter in order to help us isolate parts of the irrigation system to determine, well, actually, parts of all the water system to determine, where do we need to get, more diligent to try to find this leak. So we're really going to be keeping our eye on that low flow indicator. And this is, a project that can be maybe best done with two people, one watching the meter and one turning things off and turning things on in the landscape. But you could do it as a single person too. So the first thing that you're going to do is you are going to find the first shutoff valve on the property. Now, what that means is, remember I talked about the main line coming in from the meter. It may go to the house first and then out to the landscape, or it may go into a T where part of it goes to the landscape and part of it goes to the house. But the very first shutoff valve for the property, you're going to turn that off. You're going to turn off if there are two of them, you're going to turn both of them off, because what you're trying to isolate now is the pipe between the meter and the first shutoff valve. This is the main line. And essentially, when you're isolating a main line leak, you shut off those valves and then you wait 10 minutes and go and look at the meter. If the meter is running, there's some kind of a leak in the main line. So water's still going through that meter. It means it's coming out in the main line. It could be a very, very tiny leak. If there's no water running, the little thing isn't going, you don't have a mainline leak, and you can move on now to figuring out, okay, is the leak in the house? Is it in the landscape? Is it both? And in order to do that, you're going to need to find the house water shutoff and the irrigation water shutoff. So if you have two of these, and we're going to look first at the house and then at the irrigation. So you're going to make sure that you've shut off all water going out to the irrigation, and you're going to go ahead and shut off the water going into the house, and do it, one after the other. So you shut off the landscape line, wait for 10 minutes. If the meter's running, there's a leak in the house. Now, don't forget, if the meter's running, you do want to make sure you shut down that ice maker. I'm telling you, that's happened many times that, we thought there was a leak and there isn't. But if you've done all that and no one is doing anything in the house to use water, and you're seeing that little indicator go, you have a leak in the house, and you're going to have to address that, track that down. And so once you determine that, go ahead and shut off the house line, and now wait 10 minutes and see if the meter is still running. Then it's going to be in the landscape. So you could have leaks in both, and hopefully not, but we're going to go into the landscape from here. It is worth mentioning that if you hire a professional to do leak detection, they can use this acoustic sensing to essentially locate the leaks pretty quickly. And so it might be worth having a professional come and do this as well, but you can do it yourself. And everything I'm going to talk about now, with repairing and looking at things, this is all doable by someone with just a little bit of bravery and a little bit of understanding. It's not, don't be intimidated by this stuff. You can do it. So I promised to show you this system again, and that's because we're now going to start to look at it in detail to figure out where within the irrigation system might my leak be found. And really the first thing that you want to do is, because you've shut off the water, to the house, but there's nothing running in the landscape. So no valves are open, no hose bibs are on. If everything is turned off, walk around the property and just listen. Do you hear water running anywhere? Do you observe anything going on? Take this first step to kind of orient yourself, and really listen. And also, it's a good idea to have some flags, some landscape flags, so that you can put the flag in the ground, even if you're not sure. Like, you put it in the ground and you can come back to it. So you're going to start at the landscape shutoff valve, and you're going to move out into the landscape systematically and flag every leak that you come across. So we're going to start with the backflow preventer, and we're going to turn off the valves on the backflow preventer, and one after the other, and we're going to see, is it leaking? We're going to observe. And if it is, I would frankly recommend that if you have a leak at your backflow preventer, this is a plumber thing. So this is not something that I would say you need to take on. A lot of the other stuff definitely you can, but backflow prevention is a serious business, and I would get a plumber to come and look at it. You might have a master pressure regulator. This is particularly true if you have a large landscape and a lot of drip irrigation. Or you might have a master pressure regulator if the pressure is very high coming into your house. Might have something like this, and you want to go ahead and see. So you turn it off and you see, is it leaking? Is there water going through? Observe it. And now, from this point on, the water's going to be in lateral lines. So, or the leakage is going to be in lateral lines or at the emitters. So either at the pop-up emitters or at the drip irrigation. So you're going to need to go to the irrigation controller and start to turn on each of the irrigation zones and walk around those zones and observe what's happening. So this is an opportunity even to tune up your irrigation, even if it's not a leak, but you've got tilted heads or things like that. This is an opportunity for you to fix some of those things as well as potential leaks. So go ahead and turn on the valve, one valve zone. You're going to run it for about 10 minutes. So go ahead and turn it on and go to the irrigation valve itself. If it's a globe valve, in other words, it sits down in one of these underground containers, look inside. Is water coming out of any part of this valve? Now, maybe you have anti-siphon valves. If you have anti-siphon valves, they're sitting above the grade, and you want to go ahead and look at the anti-siphon valves, in particular the one that's running, and just see, is there water coming out of it? Now, I want to draw your attention to something, and you're going to see it every single time I pull up a picture. You're going to know immediately what's going on. And that is when you have the white PVC, this is Schedule 40 PVC. When you have that in your valve assembly, it should only be underground. So in other words, I should not see any white pipe above ground with a valve assembly, or for that matter, with a hose bib or anything. Anytime the pipe is above ground, it's supposed to be thicker type of pipe. Why? Because this white PVC pipe is really prone to cracking. It gets damaged easily from temperature changes. It gets damaged easily if the pressure has been amiss, and it's photodegrading. So it has it will break down under sunlight. So especially if it's an older system, boy, I mean, this is really a place where there's likely to be a problem. Now look, even in this case where the picture is of a very nice, clean assembly. I would be very happy with it. I would also be very unhappy with it because why? Well, you see the white pipe above grade. That means that I have the wrong kind of pipe above grade here, and that could have issues associated with it. But let's ignore that for just 1 second and take a look at the valve itself. Is this anti-siphon valve leaking in any way? Now, sometimes a little bit of water comes out when it goes on or turns off, and that's okay. I want to make sure there's no water coming out of it, sort of continuously when it's either off or on. And you can actually repair a leaking valve. And I hope that you are asking Brent questions about this because he is an expert on it. And what I'm really showing you here is that it may feel like it's a really complicated thing, but it's actually not. You are just going to remove the top of the valve. I'll show you in a second that you use a screwdriver to do it. And then you take the valve apart, and inside are going to be a couple components that are pretty straightforward. There's a diaphragm, some springs, and like a gasket kind of thing. All of these pieces could have debris in them. They could be damaged because there was debris in it. They could be damaged, a bunch of reasons. Take a look at it. It might be as simple as just washing the stuff off, right? I mean, that might be your repair. You wash it off, you put it back together, and everything works just fine. So it's worth taking a look at this for yourself before you call somebody. And there are a lot of online sources for how to do this. There are lots of videos. There's this WikiFix entry that shows you use the screwdriver to remove the bonnet, and then all these components are inside, and you put it back together. When your irrigation zone is running, if it's a spray line especially, observe, right, whether all of the sprinkler heads are emitting water in the same way, equally pressurized, or are there places where the pressure has declined? And going to the last sprinkler on the zone, which is essentially the last emitter, the furthest away from the valve, take a look at it. If it is not spraying at the same with the same vigor that the first sprinkler emitter is, it's likely that there's something going on here. It could be a break in a lateral line. You can also purchase this pressure gauge that's shown here. It's a little pricey. It's a tool, but if you have a lot of irrigation, it might be worth having it. And go out. It's really easy to you unscrew the pop-up sprinkler and you put the pressure gauge on it and rescrew the nozzle on top. I mean, it's all just twisting apart things. It's not something super complicated. And it will tell you what the pressure is at any of the sprinkler heads. So you can move around with it and see for yourself. Points of connection, as I mentioned before, these are places where there's likely to be quite a bit of damage if there is damage. So on a spray head, the point of connection that you're most concerned about is where the body of the sprinkler connects into the lateral line or connects into a swing joint, which is what you see there in the top picture. This is a little swing joint that allows you to move the sprinkler around a little bit. These are screwed together components. You are concerned about making sure that there's no debris in there, that everything is clean and tight fitting. And you just have to dig down around the sprinkler body and expose either the swing joint or the lateral line where it is connected. This is a point of, this is a place where there's likely to be some damage. The nozzles themselves can also get filled with debris, and they're relatively easy to remove. You can get a tool to unscrew the nozzle. Inside of most of the newer nozzles, there's a little this little filter. You can take it out, you rinse it off, make sure there's no debris in it. You might even run the sprinkler while this is open, run the zone, just so any debris that's in the line can be blown out of the sprinkler head. And then after it's all washed off, you screw it back together. And that could be as simple as it is. If you have a drip irrigation line, make sure that uh, when you have your irrigation designed or installed, that at the end of the line, there's something installed called a tattletale. So this is really something that you can add these onto an existing drip line, or if you're having a new drip line put in, really insist that at the end of each zone, and sometimes in multiple places, you want to have a tattletale. A tattletale is essentially a 6-inch pop-up sprinkler with a cap on it. So it's not going to emit water, but it's going to pop up when the drip irrigation line has pressure and when there's water in the line. And this is wonderful because your drip irrigation is below ground. You can't see it very easily. You want to know if it gets pressurized. This is a great way to identify, yeah, hey, this irrigation zone is working. So that thing will pop up all the way very strongly. And if it's weak or it's only popping up a part of the way, again, something is going on in the pressure in the line, likely a leak. And by the way, from a design point of view, I like to make sure that my tattletales are near my clean out valves, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit. That little box there is a clean out valve. And this way, even after my landscape grows in, I can always find ways to clean out my irrigation zone. Drip also has points of connection. And there are kind of 3 that you're really thinking about. The first one is where the risers that are bringing the water up from the lateral lines, where the lateral line and the riser connects, that's a point of connection. These are usually going to be, 6 to 12 inches below ground. And this riser is going to come up closer to the top of the soil. It might be just under the mulch even. It might be on the surface. And then that riser is going to be connected either through a T or through an elbow to your actual drip tubing. And so your actual drip tubing is going to be 1/2 inch flexible hose, and that's a point of connection. So it could be that the tubing isn't in properly. You want to take a look at that, at all of these little points of connection. And you want to try to see, are the drip emitters working? So especially if the pressure in the line isn't quite right, you are going to have to go back and expose that drip irrigation tubing and take a look at the individual emitters. If it's in line, which has the emitters built into the tubing, that's what you're seeing on the left. This is, an emitter that has, or a tube that has been damaged, or an emitter that's been damaged. On the right, this is called point source emission, and that means there's like an emitter that's been punched into the blank tubing. You can see, there's quite a bit of debris and corrosion there. So you're going to take a look at all of these. Are they all dripping the same? Are they spurting or what's going on? And if there's a emitter that's maybe popped off, let's say the pressure's been too high and emitter has been popped out, you can actually find a goof plug to stick in there and, close up the leak. But honestly, I don't recommend them. The best thing to do is to get some coupling and some additional 1/2 inch pipe and go out and cut out the section of the drip tubing and repair it with coupling on either side and new line on either inline or blank tubing that you're going to put your emitters in. It's cleaner. You know where it is for the future. It's a little better than trying to plug things up with a goof plug. I use goof plugs if I accidentally pop an emitter in, in a landscape and I have too many emitters on a plant. I might pull one out and put a goof plug in it. But for the most time, it's about cutting that line and repairing it. And it's very easy to repair it that way. So don't be intimidated by that. Now, at the end of each line of drip irrigation, besides having a tattletale, you should also have what's called a flush valve. A flush valve is a little device, and there are a couple of different ways, which I'll show you in a second. This one is a manual flush valve. It has a little gate valve there that you just turn open or closed. And when you're running the drip irrigation system and you open it up, it allows that water to really come out at pressure. And this will blow, all the debris and anything that's in your pipe out. And when you've just had your drip irrigation installed, you are going to probably have this done. Your maintenance team or you should do this, a few times in the first few weeks after an installation, and then once a quarter really for the first year. After that, you can probably get away with just a couple times a year or if you have a problem, flushing it out. But definitely having access to it is important. So think about that in the design. Okay, let's take a moment and talk a little bit about what happens if you have a pool or a water feature. This could be an outdoor leak. So the most important thing really, this is why you're monitoring your water bill, I just want to say, because, um, you know, uh, if you have a pool and your water bill is erratic, or has gotten a lot higher this year than last, I would definitely look to the pool as a possibility for the leaks. So here they're kind of, two clear culprits, or not really culprits, but ways to see what's going on. The first is to go out and look in the yard. Are there places where there's a lot of water happening? That's one. Another one is at the equipment. So is the equipment, damaged? I'll show you a picture in a second. And then actually a third way is also, are you seeing any kind of pop off of tiles or any kind of, weird thing happening on the surface of the pool itself? That could be an indicator something's going on. When you look at the pool equipment or the water feature equipment, it should not be wet around this equipment. This is all dry stuff. So if you've got pooling water there, yeah, something is amiss. This needs to be looked at. Things may need to be reglued. That is very, very typical of a pool installation, that it was done quickly, and the chemical welds might not be very good. We'll talk about that in a minute, how to avoid that. But if you're seeing water on your pool equipment, okay, that's a deal. If you're seeing corrosion at your pool equipment, also, this means something is going on. The key culprits for the leak, like kind of number one usual suspects, are the light fixtures and the skimmers. So in some ways, that's a good thing because these are already perforations of the pool or the water feature shell. And so I wouldn't go immediately to the idea, oh, I have a crack in my shell. I would go to, hey, something is happening around the skimmer or the light. It's possible that you have a crack in the shell, but it's really more likely it's here. And we're going to use a bucket, very simple, to figure out whether we have a leak. And we take a bucket and we submerge it onto um, the top stair or the top shelf of the pool. And we are going to mark on the outside of the bucket where the water line is for the pool. Then you're going to fill up the inside of the bucket to that same water line. So you're essentially, if you look at the bucket, it has water at the same level on the inside as it has on the outside. After 24 hours, you're going to take a look at it. if the water outside is now lower than than the line of the water on the inside, if it has evaporated or has gone lower than what is going on the inside, you have a leak. Why? Because evaporation is going to affect the inside of the bucket and the outside of the bucket the same. But if there's a leak, the outside is going to be dropping faster. So really fast way to figure out if you have a leak, and then you can call a leak detection company that specializes in pools and water features. They're very, very efficient, and they can come out and pretty much pinpoint where everything is using a little tablets and sometimes sensors. Okay, well, that's a lot to get your head around. There are a lot of ways that you can have leaks. How do we avoid them in the first place? Well, that's what our final section is all about. The first thing is consider dedicating a meter or a flow meter and an irrigation main line to your irrigation. And what this is essentially saying is you cannot see what you're not measuring. So when you have a dedicated copper irrigation main line and you have a flow meter or a submeter attached to that main line, you know exactly how much water is going into your landscape. If you have a large property, if you have a swimming pool, or a multifamily situation, getting a submeter, which you have to get from your water agency, or a flow meter, which you do not have to get from a water agency, but having that on the water line that is dedicated to the landscape is a really, really good idea. It helps you to identify what's going on in your landscape, very quickly. Also, I am a big fan of shutoff valves, and I want you to be too. Shutoff valves are those gate valves, or ball valves. I put them everywhere. Honestly, there is a ball valve at each irrigation valve. There is a ball valve at the beginning and end of any section that I might want to isolate. Certainly before the pool or water feature. If I have a PVC line that is a lateral line that's going out to my landscape and going under a sidewalk to irrigate a parkway that is out closer to the street, I'm going to put a shutoff valve before that water goes out to the parkway, because I might have to turn that off in order to make a repair. If I have a raised planter or a particular planting area even that maybe is, fruit trees or something like that, I put a shutoff valve there. The more shutoff valves I have, the more control I have and the more ability I have to isolate things. So, you can add shutoff valves to an existing irrigation system. Do it. The second thing is make sure that when pipes are being installed, they're buried at their proper depths. This picture is from one of our installations, and you can see, yeah, we were digging, assuming that the main line was at the proper depth of 18 inches, and voila, it was not. It was 4 inches below grade. So copper main lines are supposed to be 18 inches below grade. Irrigation lateral lines are supposed to be 6 to 12 inches below grade. And I know they're not in many of your landscapes. This is a big one. When you have a main line, it needs to be the correct schedule thickness of copper pipe. Most of the mainline damage that I have seen has happened because someone installed a thin wall copper pipe for the main line. So it should be what's called Schedule K. This is the thickest copper pipe It has a green stripe on it or green writing on it. Schedule K is what is, if water is under pressure in your landscape, it should be a Schedule K copper. Schedule L, which is the one that's not the right one, is the type of copper piping used inside your house. This isn't piping that is, subject to uh, uh, freeze, thaw, any kind of shovel, accidentally hitting it, any of that stuff. It is not thick enough. So if for some reason you have to have your main line replaced, um, or you've been having breaks in your main line and it's copper, make sure that the plumber that does the repair is using the correct copper pipe. I really can't emphasize this enough. It's heartbreaking. And the same thing is true for the Schedule 40. I mentioned before that if you have a PVC pipe that's buried underground and is not getting any solar radiation, the Schedule 40 is the pipe. That's the white one. If it's above ground, it should be Schedule 80. It's a thicker pipe. It's gray in color. That's how you tell the difference. Anytime there's a male-female connection within the line, or you're going from copper to PVC or galvanized to PVC, there needs to be pipe thread put around the connection. And make sure that your PVC pipe is being properly glued together. When you have your new irrigation system installed, go out and just take a look. One day when they're doing the installation, you don't have to stand over anybody, but just observe, are they doing it properly? You don't use a pipe cutter to cut PVC. It's cut with a hacksaw. Pipe cutter can actually damage the pipe. You have to use sandpaper to take the burrs off of it and bevel the edges of the pipe. They should be fitting the pipe together to just, dry without any glue, just to make sure it all works and it all fits together. That's, like, one of those measure once, cut twice things. Then when you're ready to go, you're going to prime both the pieces of PVC, and then you apply glue to both pieces of PVC and you put it together, you hold it together for a couple of seconds, 10 seconds, and then it gets twisted just a little bit. The thing about PVC and glue is it's welding. It's using chemicals to weld the pipe together. So unlike copper that you do with heat, you're doing it with the chemicals. So this proper way of doing it makes all the difference of whether or not you're going to have an actual welded lateral line, or is it just a place that's like stuck together and is going to be leaking, 2 years from now. So it's really important that that be done properly. The other thing is that make sure you insist that your contractor puts a sleeve under any concrete, driveway, walkway, sidewalk. You want to make sure that you have at least a 2-inch pipe, but 4 inches is even better. They are going to push back because it costs money to dig down and do this, but it really makes sense to do it because this way, any pipe that is going underneath your concrete can easily be removed and replaced. It just makes a lot of sense. It protects everything inside that sleeve. And you also want to use a sleeve for your blank irrigation tubing if you're going underneath concrete. The globe boxes, the ones that are in the ground, you want to make sure that those manifolds are, nice and tidy. I like to make sure there's gravel on the bottom, they're nice and clean. And the same thing applies above ground. If you have an anti-siphon valve, notice that the pipe here is correct. It's Schedule 80. And these valves sit 6 inches above the highest head in the landscape. So that means that if your valves are against your house, but you have a hillside that's higher than the foundation of your house, and there's a spray head up there controlled by these valves, that is not working. The valves have to be 6 inches higher than that highest head. So you want to make sure that that's what's going on. Otherwise, they're not anti-siphon. They're not protecting the water system. I actually really love to have, gravel around the base of my anti-siphon valves as well. Make sure that if you are installing drip irrigation, you're not just taking your old spray irrigation valves and putting a filter on it and a pressure regulator and saying all is well. You want to make sure that new drip irrigation valves are low flow irrigation valves. They are properly manufactured for the low flow. They might stick in an open position because they can't sense the low flow if you're using your old spray valves. So go ahead and replace the whole valve. Pressure regulation is really important. Make sure that you either have a master pressure regulator or at each of the valves there is pressure regulation, making sure that the right pressure is coming into the valve. If you have drip irrigation especially, they have a filter, which is that kind of bulbous thing there on the valve, and you need to clean those filters. They should probably be cleaned out twice a year. This one obviously hasn't been cleaned for a long time, but that's something that you want to take care of because that's debris that can cause a leak. Flush valves, I talked about them before. You want to make sure that you're flushing those valves, regularly. And you want to make sure that when it's designed, the flush valve is directing water into the landscape, not out of the landscape. Now, many contractors install drip irrigation and they put these automatic flush valves on the line. And it's perfectly okay to do that. That's the thing on the left. The problem is those things will flush water every time the zone goes on. So if you use a figure eight or a manual flush valve, you don't have that problem. You're controlling it. Putting a shutoff valve at the end of each hose is great. And adding anti-siphon protection to the hose bibs also. Keeping your drip tubing covered with mulch because drip tubing degrades in sunlight also. And making sure that your drip tubing is every component is manufactured by, it's the same manufacturer. So the emitters are the same manufacturer as the tubing and all of the compression fittings. Don't allow anyone to use the square staples when they install your drip tubing. That's used in landscape fabric, and you don't want landscape fabric anyway in your landscape. What you want are the U-tubes. They don't crimp the drip tubing, they don't damage it. That is what you want to have. Eliminate using this 1/4-inch tubing in your landscape. I mean, it's fine if you have a planter or a container. It might be the only way that you can irrigate it, but out in the landscape, these are just a recipe for disaster, so don't do it. And make sure you monitor your irrigation controller on a regular basis because if your program is running incorrectly, you could be wasting a lot of water. All right. Nick already mentioned to look for the water sense label. You certainly want to do it for all your irrigation controllers and sprinklers. And we're going to run a poll here, an evaluation. We'd love for you to fill it out and give us feedback. And we are going to go ahead and see if there are any questions. Did anybody ask questions?
We had a couple questions.
Oh, good. And maybe we'll have some now too. Who knows?
Yeah, let's see if anyone brings in questions. The only kind of irrigation question was a gentleman named Ed was having valves get stuck open and couldn't see any visible damage to the diaphragms. So, but he did flush the valves and it seems to have solved his issue. So it was likely like a tiny little pebble, like the ones that get stuck in your shoes, that when he turned the pressure off so he could open the valve and look at the diaphragm, it sunk. And then as soon as he repressurized the line, it would be pushed back up. And those little rocks are just enough that the diaphragm doesn't seat properly, so it leaks. And then when he flushed it out, he never saw it in the rush of water, but solved his problem. With no questions, I'm going to just give a couple.
raise a question, but we'll end on time. So just making sure.
We will end on time. I'm going to quick give some pro tips because this is what I do. If your valves are leaking, as in they're constantly letting water run, it is not an electrical issue 99% of the time. So the controller sends power to your valve, it opens it up, and then stops sending power, and the valve closes. So it's not like a valve can miss a signal to turn off kind of thing. So if your valve is running when you don't want it to be, switching your controller to the off position is not going to solve your issue. You have to go deal with the valve manually.
What about the question about the drip tubing?
Fine.
How
do I fix a line when the brown is hard and I can't put a connector in it? You take a lighter and you warm the line up a little bit and it makes it more pliable. Or you could expose it to sunlight, and then when it's in the warmth of the day, it makes it a lot more pliable. A lot of times when we're installing lines, we'll leave it in the sun to soften before we even install it, because it gives you a real good chest pump when you're trying to push those fittings together.
Well, also, you can leave a little bit of slack when you're installing. I mean, this idea that it has to be all these really super tight lines is just not good installation. Having a little slack in the line is good. It uses a tiny bit extra material, but it's so worth it. And that's why I recommend, instead of trying to like put new emitters in and stuff, like just be prepared to cut a section out and put new tubing in, and deal with it that way. Well, I want to thank everybody for your questions. There weren't all that many of them, but I know this has probably gotten you to start thinking about how you can identify leaks in your landscape and fix them. And even more importantly, when you do the turf replacement program, you now have an idea about things that you want to see from your contractors who are installing. Yes, so I saw that using hot water on it and all that sort of thing. Yeah, those are all good ideas for softening up tubing. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for your time this evening. Thanks for joining us. You've got a lot of things you could do on a Thursday night, the first day of spring. And we appreciate that you joined us for this class. Please keep your eye open for more classes with Valley Water. We're doing excellent classes with them, and we very much look forward to seeing you at the next one.